Hi, I'm Tatum, and at the best of times, relationships can be deeply complex, full of all different kinds of competing love languages, attachment styles. But what happens at the shittiest of times? What happens when you're in the middle of cancer treatment? What happens to your relationship? And is that something that gets talked about enough? I have two wonderful guests with me today. I'm delighted to have Donna and Jess joining to talk about breakups and cancer. What attracted you to talk about this topic? Jess first.
I think I've experienced different aspects of relationships over the two cancer diagnoses that I've had. In one of them, I was married, and during the second one, I was dating. So I guess I've got quite a range of experience of things that you might come up against when you're dating with or after cancer. And I just wanted to be able to kind of share that in the hope that it might help other people a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I always found that no one's really talking enough about it. Like, if it was up to me, every relationship, every person going through cancer, I'd want them to have a couples therapist on standby because it does make such a difference to a relationship in those like most intimate parts of our lives. Donna.
Yeah, so sadly, I guess, I have personal experience of going through a breakup. I guess I'm still quite new out of it, it's still quite fresh. It's only just been a year. I didn't realise just how common it is after a cancer diagnosis. And I think there's lots of things that go on during that whole process, and it's just another thing that you can feel quite isolated and alone on because the heartbreak hits a little bit differently, I think, and processing how you've ended up where you are and that personal feeling of it's another thing that I have no control over and I'm kind of just along the ride. Similarly to Jess, if my story can help somebody else feel a little less alone, then that's a good thing.
Donna, can you tell me how you and your partner met?
Yeah, so we were together for 7.5 years. We split August last year. We actually we met on Tinder, which I've always been a little bit like, oh, it was a Tinder thing. But he was a paramedic, I was a nurse. We just hit it off, lots in common. Our relationship, I thought, was good. We were strong, yeah, power couple. Yeah, lots of love at the time.
Tell me a little bit about how it was leading up to your diagnosis.
Yeah, so I thought we were in a good place. We had a good life together. We owned a property out in France that we holidayed at. We were making plans, lifelong plans. We definitely saw a future together. As I said, I would have said that we were really strong. Things obviously changed somewhat after my diagnosis, and I've done a lot of reflection on how we've ended up where we are and everything that led up to our breakup. But I would have said absolutely in a good place. And in fairness to him, throughout the whole of my diagnosis very early on, he was an absolute rock. I can't fault him at all. He was there when I needed him. But yeah, things shifted.
The way you were diagnosed, the world really shifted on its axis. Can you take us to that time?
Of course. So May 23, I found a lump in my breast. Went through all the usual investigations and tests, and there was some lymph node involvement in my armpit, but the diagnosis was quite positive as cancer diagnoses go. It was stage 2, very treatable. We were going to do the surgery, chemo, radio, blast all the cells, get rid of it, and then I would carry on. I went for surgery, and at the time we agreed that we wouldn't do the mastectomy, we'd just do the wide local excision, take the tumour out, and obviously pending histology. Somewhere between having the surgery and going back to start planning for chemo, I had a staging CT scan done, and it was at my appointment to start talking about chemo that my surgeon at the time explained the scan had shown that we didn't catch the cancer early enough, and actually it was stage 4. It already spread to my bones, multiple areas. And yeah, the bottom of my world just completely fell away. I heard stage 4 and that was me gone. And as I said, in fairness to my partner, he He asked the questions, the difficult questions. He listened to the information. But it was unexpected. We hadn't planned for that. We'd planned for curative treatment and then we were going to move on with our lives. And as I said, in such a short space of time, literally, that was May diagnosis for the breast cancer and then August for the stage 4. So not a lot of processing time in between at all for either diagnosis, really.
No, not at all. You were saying there was that kind of initial response from your partner, and you also described you being gone.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's gave me the image of, when something is too big for our bandwidth, that there is some part of us that sort of needs to disconnect or dissociate in order to process, little bits at a time. But actually, when you're in a couple and both people are trying to process, there's not much left over necessarily for connection. What was his initial processing response like? What were the kinds of things that he said?
Yeah, so I mean, we had the conversation around what do we do with this secondary diagnosis, and it's really hard to not just look at what does that mean for me, what does it mean for the relationship, what does it mean for you, all the things that we had planned, the future that we had planned. I can't give you that now. Like, my future is uncertain now, and I have no control over it, any of it. What happens after this? And I was in quite a dark place. I do recognise that, I wasn't in the best of mental health, well-being. We had the conversation around, he said to me, I need you to fight this. I need you to stay strong. We'll do the treatment together, whatever it takes, we'll get through it. And I'm really lucky in that, I have a really good wider support network. My friends and my family, everybody kind of rallied round. So we were surrounded by people. And I think in the early days that helped. It definitely helped him, I think. Not that he's much of a talker. And I think, I was reflecting after we'd caught up, and, communication, I think neither of us really had the words, didn't have the words to express what we were feeling, didn't really have the words to express what we really needed from each other. And we definitely didn't really have the words to express how we were going to get through it. The key things really, as I said, he was, we'll do it together, we'll fight it together. He did offer words like, I know he wanted to take care of me. We talked about my work and money, but again, I'm a little bit stubborn. And I think whilst in the long run, some of my stubbornness worked well for me personally, it didn't work well for us as a couple.
So what I'm hearing is there was a real desire to be there and to maybe say what he thought were the right things. And did he want the relationship to go forward? Did he propose at that time?
He did, yes. So we decided we were going to I was already off work, so he managed to get some time off as well. We went out to our house in France as a bit of an escape. He proposed. He did, at the time, he did say to me, I'm not proposing because of the cancer. I'm proposing because you're the person that I want to be with. And actually, he had the ring before my cancer diagnosis, but just hadn't found the time to propose. I have different thoughts about that now, but but yeah, he did. And I did say to him at the time, I can't give you the future that we had planned. And that didn't matter to him. He said it didn't matter to him. He loved me and this is what he wanted. And yeah, that's where we kind of landed.
So I can hear kind of on all fronts reassurance. Started in quite a strong place, like you would have said you were solid. And then he is making moves to say, I'm in this with you. I want to be with you. I was going to ask you anyway. In a way, I can kind of see why you kind of talked about leaving yourself, that it might have felt safe to actually, okay, you're there, you're doing that. I need to sort of put myself together now.
Yeah.
What did that look like for you? What were you doing during that time?
So I think I'd started my treatment, so that was all in place. It was really difficult. I've never felt so lost in my whole life. When people say they feel lost and they just don't know where their place is, that's how I was feeling. I didn't really know where my place in the relationship was. There were parts of the relationship that were affected, intimacy for one, but it wasn't how I felt about him or how I saw him. It was all about how I felt about myself, how I felt about my body, obviously the changes that I'd gone through, and the surgery and the treatment had started to push me into early menopause. I was kind of just all over the place, emotionally imbalanced, hormonally imbalanced, you name it, I was it. And I did commit to counselling, and my counsellor was brilliant, and it was my safe space to say all the things that I couldn't say to him, I didn't feel I could say to him, the added burden of him dealing with all of my emotions on top of everything else that he was already dealing with. And that was my safe space. I made a plan to go back to work full time because, again, that was my normality. It's what I'd already known. It was my comfort, if you like. But all of those things started to put a bit of a strain on our relationship because all of a sudden I stopped worrying so much about him, which I'd done very early on in the diagnosis. And I was very focused on myself and how do I get myself well and how do I get my mind strong again? Because, my counsellor had said you're going to be more receptive to your treatment, the better and the weller that you get. So, that was my commitment to me. I've got to get myself strong. I've got to get myself back to work and just find who I am with cancer. Like, who am I? Who is Donna living with cancer? Because I'm not the same person I was a few months ago.
So, yeah, okay, sometimes think about relationships as sort of ecosystems. And when something goes in an ecosystem, there are these sort of knock-on effects. And it sounds like to some degree he was maybe used to you being deeply considerate and caring, and you would express sort of worrying about him and what he needed. And then something shifted when you sort of went inside yourself to kind of put yourself together. What was it like right before you realized things weren't what you thought?
So I think I can look back at that time now and I can see that things were changing. I can see that actually, I had changed quite a lot in the 6 months after my diagnosis. My perspective on what was important to me and how I lived my life wasn't the same. It's not that he wasn't a priority to me anymore. It's just that, my peace and my happiness was of equal importance, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tricky because I can start to see how things were breaking down. As I said, the intimacy wasn't the same as it had been before. Things that I probably would have accepted before, I had probably less tolerance for, is how I would describe it. He worked away quite a lot, and I would sit at home and I would wait for him to come home. Whereas this time I was like, no, I'm not pausing my life anymore. Like, if there's something that I want to do, I'm going to go and do it. I'm going to spend time with my friends and I'm going to spend time with my family. And when you come home, great, we'll go and we'll do stuff together, but no more sitting waiting. And I think from a caretaking perspective, it's interesting. I was chatting to a neighbour across the road who I don't actually have lots to do with, but they'd shared with me that he had said to the neighbour that he changed his job. He left his job, a really stable job, and went self-employed. Massive life change. And I was fully supportive. If it's going to make you happy, then do it. And he had said to the neighbour that part of the reason that he'd done that was because he wanted to be around to take care of me more. But that's the first time that I'd heard that. He hadn't shared that with me. Of all the things that we talked about when he changed his job, that wasn't one of the considerations. So that kind of surprised me a little bit. But I think it comes back to what I was saying around, I don't think either of us really had the words to express where we were at and what we were feeling.
Yeah. So I can hear in there surprise and not having the words. Can you tell me about how he did end things?
He had been working away. It was the anniversary of my surgery, and I had said to him that week, I'm feeling a little bit triggered because, it's the first year and everything's happened. A lot has happened in this last year. And he didn't, I didn't feel like he really understood it. He was a little bit dismissive. I didn't get, I guess, the response or the reassurance that I was seeking from him. But, you know, maybe I wasn't explicit in what I needed, just that I'm feeling some kind of way about this. He went away for the week. I didn't really hear from him that whole week, which I found really upsetting. So you can imagine when he did come home, I'd had a whole week festering of, you know, I've had a couple of messages, no phone calls, no check-ins, no I love yous. And at that point, I just said to him, I know, I can tell something's off. I feel that something is off. I just don't know what it is, and I don't understand what it is. And at first he said to me, I don't know how I feel. I don't know how I feel, and I don't know what it is that I want. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that gives us something to work on at least. And you know, perhaps we can have counselling together. We can problem solve this together. The next day, I was like, I don't really know where we're at. I feel a little bit in limbo. And then he just said, I don't love you anymore. The spark between us has gone. And too much has happened in this last year, and I just don't love you anymore. And that's it. The relationship is over. Yeah. The fact that I can talk about it now without crying, I'm actually really proud of myself. I'm just going to say that because even just a few months ago, I would have been an absolute blubbing mess.
Yeah, because that's really, it's not, I'm not coping well, I'm not sure what I'm doing. It was made it very specific to say I don't love you after not that long of proposing, you know, and saying I'm in this with you. I can only imagine that whiplash effect. Can you tell me, what did you do sort of the day after that? Because you're already navigating this, you know, your diagnosis, moving through the world, having it, having the heartbreak and loss and grief that's associated with that. And then a whole new set of heartbreak. What was the first thing that you needed?
So I I went straight to my mum and dad's and got the biggest hug from my mum and dad, which was the comfort that I needed. I spoke to his mum and his stepdad, who, and they still are actually, have been a great support to me throughout everything that had happened around my diagnosis, and my best friend. So I drew on my closest people to just, I guess, offload a little bit. I had a period of time where I did kind of retreat. I do know that one of my coping strategies is to withdraw. And so I reverted to type, and I kind of just holed up a little bit. I cried a lot. At that point, I had finished counselling, but I did speak to my surgery. I spoke to a social prescriber at my surgery because I'd started to spiral. And I thought, I've worked so hard to get myself out of this dark place. I really don't want to go back there, but I don't know how to stop it. And I had moments of thoughts of, you know, I've put in all this effort to work hard and get on top of things and get myself well and commit to my treatment. And what's the point now? And I think I scared myself a little bit with that thought that I was like, no, I need some proper help. I need somebody removed from all of this to just give me some perspective, because you know it's easy to blame myself, which I did. You know, it's me, it's the cancer, it's another thing that's being taken away from me. So I did have counselling again for a period of time. I did do all of the usual. I took myself off of social media because I thought I don't need to see anything that's going on, but my comfort turned into TikTok.
Was there a particular thing on TikTok that you were finding? Because you need things, don't you? They're a bit like, I always think of like a bit like a blanket or a cup of tea, kind of like in terms of that you can wrap yourself or dissolve into for a period of time.
It turns out that there are a lot of people on TikTok that are also going through heartbreak at the same time, and the tarot card readers, I hate to admit it, but yeah, that Delulu-ish Kalulu. You know, every day they were telling me, you know, oh, he's really sorry, and he knows he's made a mistake, and I thought, oh, okay. Yeah, for a period of time, the algorithm gave me a little bit of comfort.
But like, I do think there is something really, really powerful in being able to see other people go through breakups. And I think there's something about, in a regular rhythm of life, you will have some friends going through a breakup or going through a divorce, or people go through the ups and downs through the years. I think there is around cancer kind of this extra surprise that it still happens, and it can feel harder to do that normal reach out to friends going, this just happened, and have them scoop you up and go, okay, girls' night out, you know. It can feel a bit like other people don't really know what to say or do. I'd love to bring Jess into the conversation here. Jess, how has it been for you hearing from Donna?
First of all, thank you for sharing your story because it is deeply personal. And I definitely recognise some themes in my own experiences of relationships and cancer. And I think I'm proud of you too for not crying about it, to be honest. Yeah, it's incredible. And I'm really glad that you're kind of getting into a better place. So yeah, there's definitely themes that I recognise that I think are probably universal for people who are experiencing cancer with or without a breakup being involved, to be honest.
And Jess, can you tell me a bit about how you met your ex-partner who you were with at the time of your first diagnosis?
Yeah, so we actually met online as well, not on Tinder, but on Plenty of Fish, so we'd been married for um, 7 years by the time I got my cancer diagnosis, which was in 2020. And we'd had a bit of a whirlwind romance, I suppose, and we got married after about a year. We were really happy. We just moved to a new house. I just got a new job, which was like my dream job at the start of 2020, literally just before COVID. And things were really good at that point, and then it all sort of went a bit a bit to pot, really, for many reasons. So yeah, so I got the diagnosis in the March of 2020. Sort of putting it into context, my mum had been really poorly just prior to that, and I'd actually delayed my results appointment for the lump that I'd found. And my parents were living with us at that time as well because she'd been poorly, and felt a bit one thing after the other. And my husband, well, he's not quite my ex-husband yet, but he's not far off. Um, he was not a talker. He'd never been a talker. And so it was just hard to talk about. A bit like I don't have the words. It was out of the blue. We didn't know how to discuss it. And we didn't have any time to discuss it either because my parents were living with us. So that kind of put an extra pressure, I think, on being able to have those conversations about what it meant and how things going to be. And it was a really tough time.
In the absence of having those words, were there sort of active miscommunications in there, or was it that things just weren't talked about, that it just sort of felt like things were building up in the background?
Yeah, I think probably a little bit of both. So because it was COVID, I couldn't take anyone with me to the appointments either. So ordinarily he would have been the person that would have come along and I think like Donna said, ask the difficult questions and take a note of information and he couldn't do that. So then I was having to come back home and kind of feedback what had been said and I wasn't really taking on board, I don't think, exactly what was happening. So I think there was a lot of questions that maybe he'd wanted to ask but didn't know how to, a lot of things that I wanted to say that I didn't know how to. And I was really frightened, as you are because you hear you've got cancer and you automatically think you're going to die. That's what you think. And so that, yeah, there was a lot of things left unsaid, I think, and some misunderstandings. And I don't think this is kind of specific to our relationship in any way. I think it's specific to a lot of relationships when you have cancer, is that, well, they're going to fix it and you're going to be all right. And and that's, it's like a tick, you're done, you're well, and you'll go on with your life. And I think that was something that I didn't really get to talk about at that time. It was just, well, they're going to make you better and then you'll just carry on.
Right.
So I think that was a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, I can hear in both of you, like when you're sort of talking about this time period, it's how hard it is for both of you to be in a place where that communication can happen and without having that language. And sometimes there is the sort of language that gets brought in from the outside, like Donna was saying, kind of like, oh, we're going to fight this, or, you know, you'll put it behind you, or these, you know, everything's going to be okay, you'll just be fine, or, you know, but actually holding that space for you to have any and all the feelings that are happening in those moments. It sounds like it was really hard to either ask for that or to know that like it would be okay to express that. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so. And there's that whole thing of strength, isn't there? Through you've got to be strong, as though somehow if you're strong enough, you'll be fine, and that there's somehow something that you can do to deal with, you know, to make yourself well. And